people. And of course, it is about money. These things always are. I mean, I'm clearly not doing this for the money. And if I was interested in making money, I'd probably had a rather different career. But yeah, it's about, can we offer training, consultancy? Can we get some research grants in? And possibilities of affiliate marketing. So there's a whole load of possibilities here. In fact, my problem at the moment is I've got far too many ideas, and I need to kind of try and whittle this down into something that's kind of can be done and is really tightly focused. But that's, at this stage, I think hopefully that gives people a bit of a sense of what could be good, and what could be useful, and how people might get involved.
So
does that help?
So Sally, do you want people to approach you on Twitter, or do you want, how would people contact you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly through social media. I mean, I'm on social media at Sal Witcher, and I've also set up an account for Inclusive New Normal, which is at Inclusive New. I'm also on Instagram, although I use that mostly for my paintings, but that's another route that you could contact me. Yeah, but I think those are probably the easiest routes, rather than giving out email addresses. But I can do that as well if you want to contact me via social media first, and we think a chat would be good or whatever. So yes, please do. I'd really like to hear from you, although I'm slightly wary about either nobody replying or being completely overwhelmed, but I prefer the latter.
Well, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when it comes, eh? But yeah, we've covered more than an hour. It's just flown by, and it's been great to listen to you. I could go on for for many more hours, but I did promise the audience a chance to speak to you. So I would like to open the floor to questions, but I'm just going to move to Gemma first to see if Gemma has anything to come back to you about what you said. But otherwise, he can take us through our idea of how we manage the space for questions.
No, I'd love to give some people. I appreciate we've definitely flown through an hour quick. I'd love the opportunity to hear from some folks. Dr. Sally, we've got Cindy here, so she might be open to. She's invited the entire world to come live on her farm. So that's while she dissects mice. But I'd love for anybody that would like to come up and request. We'll go by hand format, and if you could be considerate of your time, we'd love to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be a question. If you just have a comment or an idea, please come up, speak to us. I can see we have a couple already. Gemma, do you see?
Yeah, it looks like we've got Stan B first, and I'm trying to get a couple others connected.
Hi there. Hello. Hello, Dr. Sally. Really enjoyed that. I probably live just down the road from you. I'm in Edinburgh. So I actually have long COVID. I'm quite active under my other pseudonym, Stan Wolf. So you might have seen that other name. I know Jammer. Really, I've never nodded so much to one of Pete's perspectives so much, and I'm going to be one of the people that's going to be hounding you, I'm afraid, and as a potential partner, as I myself have been working on something in the background. As someone with long COVID, energy is very limited, so it's a case of spending a little bit of time each day just doing a tiny bit where I can. But I remember I was really interested around your involvement with stakeholders and agency. and particularly intrigued by your the Firstport application, because I was going to go down that same route. And when you started talking about events, I kind of tuned out of Firstport because I was finding that they were hosting in-person events, and I approached them about, is this going to be hybrid and blah blah blah, and they were very dismissive and like, how, you know, why are you asking? And this is like to give people more information here, give people a bit more context. It's a disability-led social, or supposedly disability-led and inclusive-led social enterprise. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how perhaps your new initiative could complement these, you know, these bigger boys in the social enterprise market, how you would complement that, and also how you would, you know, how you're looking to, you know, from my perspective, I'm looking at maybe the commercial marketing side of things and showing the you know, the benefits of being more inclusivity. But are you looking potentially at, you know, maybe those bigger, you know, governmental stakeholders and using your experience and your background as a bit of clout to sort of like maybe break down some of those barriers? Anyway, that was probably a lot. I spoke a lot more than I meant to, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I think so, yeah. I'm happy to talk to you on another occasion in more detail about stuff. But yeah, I think I've got very extensive networks, including in government, and I've got good relations with officials and stuff who've been really helpful actually, and I know quite a lot of the people, you know, ministers and so on. In fact, one of the new intake was one of my organisation's interns a few years ago. We managed to get quite a lot of disabled people into Scottish Government through the internship programme, which was quite an interesting interesting way of getting your secret agents into of infiltration, I like to think of it. Yeah, it's kind of it is using those networks. I'm not particularly interested in competing with anybody about anything. I'm not, you know, I don't want to be the Scotland's top social enterprise. I'm really not interested in that. I'm not interested in this for the money. The only thing I'm interested in with regard to the business side is that I see that there are so many business opportunities here.
Absolutely.
That business is not noticing. They could be cashing in on so much.
Oh,
why aren't they? You know, so yeah, that's my interest in the business end of it, not necessarily, you know, turning to some giant setup. And frankly, right now, if I could earn enough out of it to pay myself a living wage, that would be something. So yes, I don't know if that even begins to answer your question, but yeah, that's probably the best.
Yeah, it's knowing where to start, because it's such a wide remit, isn't it? And then it's like, okay, well, where can your experience and you've already got a bit of media clout, where can you begin?
Yeah, it's narrowing it down to, I think, a handful of projects and I'm trying to get a really good website set up, which can do a lot of things, including be a route through which people can have dialogue and contribute to good practice and stuff.
And having that community, I think.
Yeah. And the affiliate. So the website's going to be a biggie, and really important part of the of how this is going to work. It's obviously.
Well, I'll drop you a line, because I'm, I might better help you with that as well. So
fantastic, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, thank you for that, Stan. Boop. Interesting username, but sounds like there could be something worthwhile to pursue between the two of you there.
Yeah.
I want to move to Helen Essex, who's the next to speak. Hi, Helen.
Hi, Sal. I don't think anything I'm going to say is particularly original, but just listening to you speak, and it brought to mind other bits of other conversations I've heard. And one thing that really struck me was when you said, you were talking about the nothing about us without us, and it made me think about early on in the pandemic, and there was that phrase, focused protection, Do you remember that? And it just made me think straight away when they started talking about that. I thought, well, that's just nonsense, because there was nothing within that explained what focus protection was and how it was going to work. But everybody, inverted commas, just seemed to sort of accept that. Oh yeah, well we'll deal with that by just having focus protection for vulnerable people. And I think that just kind of demonstrates what you're saying about how it's when things are done to people, it kind of it doesn't fulfill its objectives. And I think that's kind of maybe where things, well, lots of things went wrong, but almost it became too easy to dismiss other needs on that basis of like, oh well, we're doing focus protection, or like, well, you can wear a mask if you feel like you need to, and that kind of thing. So that was one point I wanted to make. And just some of the other things you were saying, so like the inclusive new normal idea, and it reminded me of another perspectives that Pete did with Dr. Afia, and she was talking about organising and rationalising all of our efforts, in like how you've touched on, there are so many projects and people, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I think what you're saying, what comes through to me is this making a positive statement, and how you described thinking, well, what would this inclusive new normal look like? And I think it's been discussed elsewhere about almost like having a bill of rights. So there'll be the last speaker saying, oh well, can we buddy up with these other stakeholders and other events that are happening? And it's like, how about approaching them with, here's our bill of rights, if you like, and can you adopt this practice, this sort of best practice? So it's just some sort of thoughts, but I mean, your enthusiasm and energy is fantastic, and I just wondered if, the other thing that Dr. Vera sort of talked about was maybe organising some kind of conference. And I just, when you speak, I just feel like I can really see you in that way, bringing together groups and drawing out lots of little mini projects almost. You know, you were saying, there's so many ideas, and how can we focus it? And that was just my general points. But thank you very much.
Thank you. A lot in there. Yes, I mean, I have mixed views about conferences. I always want to know what they're for and what's going to happen because of them that wouldn't have happened with, if they didn't take place. And quite often the answer is, well, we wouldn't have got the nice lunch, or I wouldn't have seen my pal so-and-so and caught up on the gossip about such and such. But actually, it's a lot of people who already know each other, who've been saying the same things to each other for a very long time, just saying it all again. So you can tell I've probably been to far too many conferences in my time, which is probably true. But there is definitely something here about, or Inclusive New Normal don't have to do it all. There's some fantastic organisations out there doing brilliant work around all of these issues. They're having lots of conferences, lots of themselves, and events and webinars, and they've got brilliant information resources. It's about, how do you pull this together? How do you kind of get it all working together, and amplifying the fantastic work that's already happening, and making sure you're not just duplicating it, because that's a waste of time, and pretty annoying for them as well, I would imagine. So let's make the most of what's already there, and let's, it is about trying to see where can you, add the most value, really. And it's about keeping very focused on impact. So much work is about process, about kind of, well, let's have a strategy, like this, how many government strategies you've seen, the huge amount of effort goes into developing them. I think I was involved in, I counted about 6 disability strategies over about 10 years. They all said the same thing. But, there's a fanfare of trumpets when they're launched. And then it's like they just disappear until a few years later they go and reinvent it all again. Now, I'm sorry, that does sound a little bit jaded, but I have been around that hamster wheel rather few too many times. So it's about it's about what is it doing in terms of people's actual lives, because so much of this happens in a parallel universe. So little workshops of people, as I say, people saying the same things to each other, and we've got to get out of that parallel universe, and we've got to try and make sure that what's happening. I've sometimes thought if everybody got out of this conference and actually went and did something faintly useful for their neighbours instead, would that not be a better use of people's time? So I'm very focused on, if it isn't actually touching people's lives, I don't care about your aspirations, I don't care about your visions. They're not worth it. Strategies are not worth the cyberspace they operate, the paper they're written on, if they're never delivered into something that makes a difference to the people who need it to happen.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Helen, for those thoughts and comments and questions. I think, Cindy, you were next.
Thanks, Pete. I just came up to clarify what Jammer said about the whole world. It's not the whole world I've invited, just the COVID-conscious world. The rest of it at the gate to be taken up by zombies or what have you. I don't care. So, but it's interesting. We're nestled into the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Alberta, Canada. And when the pandemic hit, I just shut my gate. And we invited people who wanted to be COVID safe, and, for 2 solid years, we had rotating doors for people who wanted to be COVID safe, and we would employ 2-week quarantines. And it was so lovely to live in an environment with people that cared for each other, and I completely acknowledge my privilege because I was working at home before the pandemic hit. We use horses to make antibodies for various applications here, and I do have my own laboratory here and was independent pre-pandemic, so it was easy, I guess, if you could use that word, for me, just to shutter my gates and stay where I was. And I'm still here. I have not stopped. And I have not rejoined society because this is not a society I care to rejoin. Something that is so eugenic and ableist and cruel and uncaring. I'm quite happy just to stay here.
Thanks for correcting me, Cindy. I don't think you'll get many people that'll disagree with the Walking Dead scenario that you posed there. I didn't mean to include everybody, just everybody in the space, perhaps 99%. Everybody kind of loves to joke about where can we all go, and unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. That people feel they need to escape their own homes to find some utopian society to escape this dystopian situation. So
yeah, but Sally, it's interesting you were talking about maybe going down legal routes to see whether we can influence this. I know there's a doctor in Canada, Dr. David Keegan, who's looking at taking legal action, because not allowing masks and protection in healthcare is really so wrong. I see Ziad has arrived. Now, we have to be careful here because Ziad is a telecoms engineer, and whenever I invite him to a space, it breaks.
Everybody turn on your Wi-Fi, your cell service, and plug in because Ziad's here and we're gonna crash.
Hey, Ziad.
I resemble that remark. Sally, can you hear me all right?
I can, yes. Hi, hello.
And Ashley, Pete, and Jammer, I must rebut your unprofessional advice. Actually, you're better off just sticking with one channel whether it's Wi-Fi or it's your cellular network when you're on Spaces. And sometimes what happens is either a guest or a member of the audience, when they move up to speak, has maybe been on both connection types, maybe when they're moving in and out, let's say, of their office to then speak privately or from outdoors to indoors, and then we end up getting hung up on Spaces where we can't hear each other. But yes, I have been associated with 2 Spaces failures in the past where the appointed guest couldn't hear the question. I replied